Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatyarishatarine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyarishatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasati Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasati Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Bo Hare Bo Gaura Hare Bo Gaura Hare Bo Hare Bo Hare Bo Gaura Hare Bo Jaya Vaishnava Thakur Vaishnava Thakur Vaishnava Thakur Jaya Vaishnava Thakur Jaya Vaishnava Thakur Jaya Vaishnava Thakur Vaishnava Thakur Jaya Vaishnava Thakur Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Shri Srinivas Gaura Hari Ki Jai, Shri Vaishnava Thakur Ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai, Shri Srinivas Gaura Hari Hari Bol. So Hare Krishna everyone, welcome again to our discussions today. We are on chapter 26 currently of the teachings of Lord Caitanya, and this is a wonderful work by Srila Prabhupada, which is based on the authorized biography of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And his biography is called the Caitanya Charitamrita, and it was written by Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. The teachings of Lord Chaitanya, as we read in the week from a very nice quote by Srila Prabhupada, is actually very essential to our spiritual development. So I actually want to also share some slides today to help our discussion. So I'm just, please apologize. Please accept my apology. I'm actually going to upload it quickly so that we can, today we're going to be quoting some verses, and the images would actually help us as well. So last week, we were discussing about last week we were discussing that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had convinced Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya about the superiority of the Lord's personal form over the impersonal aspect. This is actually the gist of their discussion. And now that Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya in this chapter has accepted it, we will see how he actually receives the Lord's mercy in a very special way. So we'll begin with our prayer. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gnananashalaakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manokishtam Svapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Vidati Swapadantikam Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pasharine Nirvishesha Shunyavari Pasrati Deshtarini. And we'll chant the invocation, which is verse 18 of the first chapter of the Caitanya Charitamrita. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaura Bhaktivinoda, Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaura Bhaktivinoda, Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaura Bhaktivinoda. And the translation of this verse is, glory to Shri Chaitanya and Nityananda, glory to Advaita Chandra, and glory to all the devotees of Sri Gaura, Lord Chaitanya. So this chapter is quite aptly titled, Bhattacharya is converted. So we'll start by reading. Actually, in pure consciousness, the living entity understands himself as the eternal servant of the Supreme Lord. Under the spell of illusion, a person accepts the gross and subtle bodies as his self. Such a conception is the basis of the doctrine of transference from spirit to matter. So we've been coming across quite a few doctrines in our readings, and sometimes this may seem a little bit confusing. We must understand, though, that the Vedic literature of which we are going through is very complex. There are a lot of doctrines, there's a lot of theological points, there's a lot of discussions that may sometimes go over our heads. As much as we try to simplify them, sometimes we just have to take them head on. Right? So we will discuss this doctrine, the transference of spirit to matter. It's actually, it's not as complicated as it sounds. It basically means that when the soul comes into this world, originally it has a spiritual form by which it serves the Supreme Lord in Vaikuntha, spiritual world. And because the soul does not want to serve Krishna anymore, it basically loses that form. And it means that the soul has to act from a platform of matter, because it's coming into the material world to experience, right, what it's like to be the Lord of creation, and that can only be possible in the material world, right? The world of matter. So it means that the soul has to somehow transfer all its abilities to the material world, right? To a body made of material elements. So the interface for this to happen is the false ego. The false ego is like the program that allows the system to run. And that ability that the soul conveys to matter through the false ego is consciousness. Consciousness is actually that one ability that the soul still has from the spiritual platform, but that is essential to the running of the material body. The material body cannot exist without consciousness, right? And this we see, of course, at the time of death. When someone passes away, consciousness is actually missing, right? Everything else is there. All the other elements of the body is there, but the consciousness has left. So through the consciousness supplied by the soul, the false ego is able to run the body. And this is basically spirit to matter. This is the doctrine. Then, under the influence of that false ego, the soul is acting as the body, thinking that it is the body, forgets completely that it is the spirit soul, that it has spiritual nature. But the part and parcel of the Supreme is not eternally subjected to gross and subtle bodily life. The gross and subtle coverings do not comprise the living entity's eternal form. It cannot be changed, or the living entity can be freed entirely. Sorry, let me start from the beginning. But the part and parcel of the Supreme is not eternally subjected to gross and subtle bodily life. The gross and subtle coverings do not comprise the living entity's eternal form. They can be changed, or the living entity can be freed entirely from material existence. When the living entity is under the illusion that he is the body and mind, however, he has certainly transferred his position from spirit to matter. And so this is basically the understanding. When the soul thinks that he is the body and mind, he has transferred his position from spirit to matter. So this is what has happened to all of us, and we can understand it practically because none of us has any concept of being a spirit soul at all, right? All of us are convinced that we are these material bodies. Mayavadi philosophers, taking advantage of this doctrine of transference, say that the living entity is under the wrong impression when he thinks himself to be part and parcel of the Supreme. They maintain that the living entity is the Supreme himself. This doctrine cannot be tenable. So this is how those from the background of Mayavad or Advaita, this is how they misunderstand this doctrine, or how they misapply it. Right? They say that we are thinking that we are this body when we are actually the soul, which is fine. We agree with that as Vaishnavas. But then they're saying that more than that, we are actually God. And while in this body, we've forgotten it, and we can become self-realized of our positions as souls. And at that point, we realize that we're also God. That's their interpretation. That upon reaching self-realization, reaching the position of understanding that we are spirit, we will also realize we're God. Now, as Vaishnavas, we understand that when we reach self-realization, we realize that we have the qualities of God. We suddenly feel that sense of eternality, bliss, and knowledge. None of us has that feeling right now. This much we're all convinced of. Right? We're all feeling very temporary. This is the reason why we have that constant foreboding, the constant fear of danger or death, right? Because there's this understanding, at least within the soul, right? Because of the identification of the body, that it's not going to last forever. Even if we ignore it, even if we try to put it away, there is some kind of understanding somewhere within that this body is going to die. And because of that, we have this constant need to protect ourselves, right? We also have the sense of being unhappy. All of us feel that also. And so we're always searching for happiness. We're always looking for something to distract us, whether it's something as simple as watching TV, or whether it is wanting to go out, go on a fancy holiday. Right? All of us are looking for happiness, right? And the other thing that we're looking for is knowledge, because we all have that sense of, I don't know much, or I don't know what I need to know. And sometimes it doesn't bother us, but then just see if somebody asks you to give a class or to give a lecture or to give some kind of lead some kind of discussion, and then all the fears come out. I don't know anything, and it's very acute as well when we have exams or some other opportunity to be tested. So all of us have that feeling, and that's because of the identification with the body, which is completely based in these three things: ignorance, right? Being temporary, right? And being unhappy or miserable. So when we come to that level of spirit, we don't have the sense of these three things anymore. It's the exact opposite. Now we understand we are eternal, that we're full of knowledge and bliss. So those who come from a Mayavad perspective, they take that to mean that the soul has realized itself to be God, but rather at this point, the soul should be realizing itself to be servant of God. This is why real devotional service begins at this point. So Prabhupada says here that this doctrine, the way they put it, right, it can't be tenable. And we'll take a simple example. We can see that everything in this world is running under some superior nature. It must be for there to be so much of order. Would we want this world to be under the direction or the guidance of a God who forgets that they're God, and in that state makes a whole lot of mistakes, does a whole lot of things that are not acceptable? Basically, we're saying, could we accept that we're all God and that we forget we're God and we do, in some cases, very terrible things, right, as human beings? And then at some point we can wake up from that and remember we're God and then act properly. Can we imagine that this whole sophisticated cosmic setup is running under that kind of person, right, or that kind of being? Right? That would certainly be very, very far-fetched. Right? There must be some superior intelligence behind all of this, and that superior intelligence can't forget, especially for millions, billions, countless amount of time, that he or she is God. Right? That level of forgetfulness is quite shocking. It's not acceptable for a supreme being, right? And then we contrast that to Krishna, who never forgets that he's God. Krishna is born to his parents, and the second later, he is completely cognizant and he's discussing with his parents many things. He's accepting their prayers, telling them what to do in order to protect him, right, out of their love from cancer. This can't be reproduced by any other person, right? This is the standard of God, right? So we in no way could actually compare to that. So this is why Sri Prabhupada says this Mayavad theory is just not possible. So we know, of course, that we are we have the same qualities of the Lord, right? Eternity, knowledge, and bliss. And we also know that in that way we are thought of as Brahman. We thought of as small Brahman, and the Supreme Lord is Para Brahman. This is our relationship. So to think of ourselves as Brahman is not wrong. Right? And in this way, the Mayavadis are actually correct. We all are Brahman, but as quality and not as the Supreme Brahman, the Para Brahman. There's still a distinction, right? The oneness and the difference. And we have forgotten that nature of Brahman under illusion. The Bhattacharya then asked Lord Caitanya to explain the famous Atmaram verse, for he desired to hear it from the Lord himself. So the Bhattacharya, he's become now so convinced that he's wanting to hear about this famous verse. So I'm just going to call up that slideshow so that we can look at the verse while we're discussing. I think it might help our focus. So we discussed this verse a little bit last week. It's from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 7, Text 10. It's a very interesting verse, and it's spoken by Sutta Goswami. I'm just opening this PowerPoint. Okay, there we are. So we will look at the verse on the screen as well. Suta uvacha Atmarama Shamunayo Nirgranta api urukrame Nirkurvantiya haitaking bhaktim Ittam bhutagano harihi. And the translation is, Suta Goswami said, all different varieties of Atmaramas, those who take pleasure in the Atma or self, or spirit self, especially those established on the path of self-realization, though freed from all kinds of material bondage, desire to render unalloyed devotional service unto the personality of Godhead. This means that the Lord possesses transcendental qualities and can therefore attract everyone, including liberated souls. So we will recall a few chapters back when Lord Chaitanya was discussing um, transcendental topics with Sanatana Goswami, his disciple and follower. Sanatana Goswami had also asked about these verses. Actually, in terms of chronology, Lord Chaitanya had explained this first to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya here after the Bhattacharya's request. But we discussed the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya and Sanatana Goswami first. So we actually heard the explanations of Lord Chaitanya to Sanatana Goswami before we read them here. But if anyone wants to hear about those in detail, the recordings are on our Facebook page. For now, we'll just go briefly through the significance of this verse, right? So we can see that the person here called an Atmaram is somebody who is on the path of self-realization, right? And they are freed from all kinds of material bondage. It means that they are completely liberated from this material world. They don't have any karma at all. Right? They've stopped doing things for themselves. They've stopped acting on the level of the false ego. And it means that all their actions don't lead to karma. It means that nothing of this world is affecting them. Not heat, not cold, not pain, not pleasure, not poverty, not riches. Right? This is how in complete balance they are once they have become detached from material things. And what's interesting about these people is that even though they don't have any kind of attraction for anything, they still have attraction to Krishna. They can develop the desire to render service to him in the right circumstances. And last week we said that if they come in contact with a pure devotee, they get that kind of mercy. So how is it that they can be completely detached and have no attractions, but then be attracted at the same time? The only way is that they are detached from everything material, but Krishna is not material. So once one becomes completely detached from material things, one can develop complete attachment to Krishna. And that is because of all his transcendental qualities. And so he can attract anyone, even these people who are not easily attracted to anything. So we also talked about two examples from the scripture, Shukadeva Goswami and the four Kumaras, who started off being impersonalists like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, believing only in the supreme light and not believing in form as supreme. And then they got attached to Krishna's form. And they started rendering devotional service to him. So this is very important for us because it means that those people who say that form is material, including Krishna's form, this verse is a practical demonstration that Krishna's form is not material. Because if it was, it would never have been able to attract all these liberated souls. So because of how complex this verse is to people who come from impersonalist backgrounds, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he wanted to hear the explanation from Lord Chaitanya himself. Lord Chaitanya replied that first of all, the Bhattacharya should explain the verse according to his own understanding, and then Lord Chaitanya would explain it. The Bhattacharya then began to explain the Atmarama Shloka using his methods of logic and grammar. Thus he explained the Atmarama Shloka in 9 different ways. The Lord appreciated his erudite scholarship in explaining the verse and said, "My dear Bhattacharya, I know that you are a personal manifestation of the learned scholar Brihaspati and can explain any portion of the Sastras nicely. Yet your explanation is more or less based on academic education only. But there is another explanation besides the academic, scholarly one." So now if you look at this verse, right, we might have difficulty explaining it in one way. So for the Bhattacharya to explain it in 9 different ways, right, that's nothing to be sniffed at. It's not easy to explain Sanskrit verses nicely. and in a proper scholarly way, and then in 9 different ways, right? So it was quite an achievement of the Bhattacharya, especially because Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was pleased, right? He's the Supreme Lord, and he's the one from whom all knowledge originates. But still, the Lord says to him that this is an academic understanding. It's an academic, or these 9 explanations are academic. And that is because Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is actually an incarnation of Brihaspati. So who's Brihaspati? He is the priest of the gods. He's the Brahman of the demigods. And that means he must be exceptionally learned, because it's his responsibility to explain the Vedas to the demigods and help them carry out the rituals of it. Right? So we may be surprised that the demigods that they are subject as well to the Vedic rituals and the learning from the Vedas. But the Vedas is not just for humankind; it's not just for the earth, and it's actually for all of the universe. So the demigods, they also have to carry out these rituals if they want some material benefits. Right? And we read in the 4th canto how Indradev had carried out 100 Ashwamedha yagyas under the guidance of Brihaspati. And he had gotten so much benefit from it that when Maharaj Prithu was trying to do the same, he actually wanted to, he interfered with that. He didn't want Maharaj Prithu to perform the same feat. He didn't want Maharaj Prithu's fame to exceed his. So he actually he interfered so much with the 100th yagya that Maharaj Prithu had to call it off. So Brihaspati may be very learned, like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, but in an academic way. And Lord Chaitanya, being a pure devotee, in the mood of a pure devotee, he understands this verse and everything else in a deeper, more esoteric way, the way that a devotee would understand. So we understand. We also realize from this that the demigods are not always pure devotees, right? Just like Brihaspati, but they can, and so their explanations may not be like that of a pure devotee, and they're also not on the same platform as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? They are much higher platform than the rest of us, but they are not the ones whose scripture originates from. Therefore, their understanding is not as complete as the understanding of the Lord. So both as pure devotees and both as the Supreme Lord, they don't exactly, they're not on the same level. So, so therefore, it's important that we get the instructions in scripture from the Lord, from his incarnations, right, from his direct associates, and those pure devotees who follow in their example. And the demigods actually would follow that also. Like we see Brihaspati in his incarnation as Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he also accepts the incarnation, the instructions of the Lord. So sometimes we make that mistake of thinking that we have better things to do than engage in religious activities. But we're having an opportunity that even the demigods don't get. Right? So we must actually take the best advantage of that. And there isn't actually anything more important, because having this knowledge is helping us to achieve the ultimate goal at the time of death. We have to develop our spiritual consciousness for that. So now, Lord Chaitanya is going to explain this verse word by word. And word by word, there's 11. Then at the request of the Bhattacharya, Lord Chaitanya explained the Atmarama Shloka. The words of the verse were analyzed thus. 1. Atmaramaha. 2 is Cha. 3 is Munayaha. 4 is Nirgrantaha. 5 is Api. 6 is Urukrame. 7 is Kurvanti. 8 is Ahoitakim. 9 is Bhaktim. 10 is Ittam Bhuta Gunaha. And 11 is Harihi. And then in brackets, Sri Prabhupada said here, this verse has already been explained in connection with the Lord's teachings to Sanatana Goswami. So without mentioning the 9 explanations of the Bhattacharya, Lord Chaitanya explained the verse by analyzing these 11 words. In this way, he expounded 18 different explanations of the verse. In summary, he said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is full of innumerable potencies. No one can estimate how many transcendental qualities he possesses. His qualities are always inconceivable, and all processes of self-realization inquire in a general way into the potencies and qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the devotees of the Lord immediately accept the inconceivable position of the Lord. Lord Chaitanya explained that even great liberated souls like the Kumaras and Shukadev Goswami were also attracted to the transcendental qualities of the Lord. So what does this actually mean for us, right? When we look at all this philosophy? We've been reading a lot about this verse now, the meaning of it, how the minds of the liberated souls are attracted to Krishna's qualities. Now, we may not be fully liberated, this much we know. So it may be impossible for us right from the beginning to be fully attached to Krishna like these souls. But to the degree that we are detached, we get attached to Krishna. And that explains why we can take to the process of devotional service. We can make important changes to our lives for Krishna. We can make the time to attend programs, to chant his names, to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, to serve his devotees, right? All of these things are because of our growing attachment to him as our material attachments are getting less. So the last three activities in particular, chanting, studying the scriptures, serving the devotees, those are the things that actually help us get more attached to Krishna and consequently more detached from material things. This is how it works. So we start off with an initial attraction, and that grows as we become more detached from material things. And it happens with these three activities. Srimad Bhagavatam guides us in this. Nastapraya Shabhatreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utmashnoke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishti. By regular attendance in classes on the Srimad Bhagavatam and rendering service, Nitya Bhagavata Sevaya, to the pure devotees, right? All the troublesome things in our heart, which are these material attachments, all of that gets destroyed, right? And progressively loving devotional service becomes established in our heart. So we see that exactly what the Lord is speaking about here, that is happening to the liberated soul who gets attached to Krishna because they have no material attachments. So we are working towards that, becoming free of these troublesome material attachments in the heart and getting attracted to Krishna, his pure devotional service. So we must place emphasis on pure chanting or attentive chanting to the holy name, attentive, concentrated hearing of scripture, and serving the devotees all the time, right? As much as possible, steadily, and without motivation. And this is what will actually make those activities purer and purer to help us. So if we see that we're making progress towards that ultimate goal, it helps us understand that spiritual life is very positive. In general, in material life, we're very negative. Right? We are looking or staring down old age and death, disease in between. And even when we try to discuss these things about reaching a higher goal at the time of death, people may think we're being negative. But actually, when we see the progression of life, we don't see it in a negative way. We see that we are preparing ourselves for something wonderful, a true eternal life, a truly happy life, a new existence. This is what devotional service is actually building us up to. Right? This is something to actually look forward to with the passage of time, and not actually fear it. And this is what engaging in these activities actually does for us by clearing all those material iniquities out from us. The Bhattacharya appreciated Lord Chaitanya's explanation, and he concluded that Lord Chaitanya was none other than Krishna himself. The Bhattacharya then began to deprecate his own position, relating that he had at first considered Lord Chaitanya to be an ordinary human being and therefore committed a great offense. He then fell down at the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya, deprecating himself, and requested the Lord to show his causeless mercy on him. So this is a very important point because Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was the chief scholar in the court of the king at the time, Maharaj Prataparudra. So it means he was literally the most intelligent, most learned man in the land. And what comes with being scholarly is also being arrogant. So in the beginning, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was a bit arrogant. He saw Lord Chaitanya and he saw him as a handsome young sannyasi with just these ecstatic episodes and no real knowledge of Vedanta, just like the Mayavadi scholars of Benares had thought. So he thought, let me teach this young man a thing or two about Vedanta. He didn't have any idea that Lord Chaitanya was the origin of the Vedanta, that the Vedanta was about him, and that even as a devotee and not the Supreme Lord, Lord Chaitanya was demonstrating that the ecstasies of devotional service are the conclusion of the Vedanta. So it's good, though, that Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya eventually, with humility, accepted the teachings of the Lord and prayed for forgiveness. He could have, if he was very arrogant, he could have just denied what Lord Chaitanya had taught him and not accepted his defeat. And so we must appreciate that he actually accepted it all humbly and prayed for forgiveness and wanted to learn the true explanation or understanding of Vedanta. Lord Chaitanya appreciated the humility of this great scholar and therefore exhibited his own form, first with 4 hands and then with 6 hands, Sadbhuj. So this is a very special form of the Lord. The Lord has shown his 2-handed form before and his 4-handed form, just like Lord Chaitanya. We also see that in Bhagavad Gita. And the Lord also showed himself in Bhagavad Gita as the universal form having unlimited hands. And Lord Chaitanya also demonstrated that universal form. But only Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu shows this unique and beautiful 6-handed, 6-armed form. And this form is called Sadbhuj, literally 6 arms. So we see the 2 bluish arms of Krishna that hold the flute, and the 2 greenish arms of Lord Ram that hold the bow and arrow, and the 2 golden arms of Lord Chaitanya that hold the sannyas danda and the water pot. So this beautiful image is actually reflected in a very important verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, very beautiful verse that actually refers to all 3 of these lords, who all had to leave the home where they appeared for different reasons. It's very interesting to note that. And they did that for the ultimate well-being of the world. So we will read the verse. It's Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, text 5, chapter 5, text 34. Tyaktva sudustya cha surepsita rajya lakshmi dharmishta arya vachasaya dagadaranyam maya mrigam taitayepsitam andadhavad vande maha purushate charanaravindam. And the translation of this verse is, O Mahapurush, I worship your lotus feet. You gave up the association of the goddess of fortune and all her opulence, which is most difficult to renounce and is hankered after by even the great demigods. Being the most faithful follower of the path of religion, you thus left for the forest in obedience to a Brahmana's curse. Out of sheer mercifulness, you chased after the fallen conditioned souls who are always in pursuit of the false enjoyment of illusion, and at the same time engaged in searching out your own desired object, Lord Shyamasundar. Okay, so this verse, translated as such, is directly referring to Lord Caitanya. If we look a bit more carefully at it, we see that the first line says that the Mahapurush, the Supreme Person, gave up the association of the goddess of fortune. So the goddess of fortune in Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes is his wife, Vishnupriya Devi. She's an extremely exalted personality, the expansion of the Lord Bhuj Shakti. She is in the middle of this image. She was excellent in all respects and was the perfect consort of Supreme Lord, and they were married when she was very young. You can see in the first image on the top left. And then the Lord took sannyas a very short time later, when she was probably about 16 years old. And although she was extremely heartbroken, she accepted the Lord's sannyas for the benefit of the world. And so she basically gave him up for all of us. And it said in the verse, in obedience to a Brahmana's curse. So we may not know about this pastime, but there was actually a Brahmana in Navadvip who was very unhappy that he couldn't get entrance into the Lord's Sankirtan pastimes. The Lord used to enjoy Sankirtan with his very close associates in the house of Srivas Thakur every evening. And because this Brahmana couldn't attend, one day he saw the Lord Chaitanya at the banks of the Ganges, and he broke his Brahman thread and he cursed him, Lord, that he would be bereft very soon of material happiness.
Blocking me off.
um, this is actually part of the Lord's pastimes. He accepted um, the curse of the Brahmana because he knew he had a mission to fulfill and that he would be able to fulfill that mission more effectively as a sannyasi. But it meant that he had to leave behind his aged mother and his very young wife. So Srimati Vishnupriya Devi was so devastated that initially she wasn't eating. And Lord Chaitanya actually appeared to her in a vision, and he was very concerned. It's like, how can I continue my my mission if you're not taking care of yourself? So then she said that as a chaste wife, she has to take only the remnants of his meal, and therefore he told her to have a deity made, right, who would actually be him, right? Literally, he would be present in that deity, and she could offer um, everything to the deity first and have that as remnants, right? The remnants of her husband. So this deity was made from the tree that the Lord was born under. So we can see on the right at the top, right, the first image is of the same deity dressed in the clothes of Lord Chaitanya, and we see the same deity on the picture on the right, top right now, dressed in the clothes of Vishnupriya. This is very interesting. And it's because Vishnupriya served this deity faithfully throughout her life. She actually lived till her 80s, right, in intense separation from Lord Chaitanya. And then she disappeared into this deity, right? And that is demonstrated by the nose ring. This deity has a nose ring, indicating that Srimati Vishnupriya is actually present in this deity as well. So mostly he's dressed in the clothes of Lord Chaitanya, but on special occasions, like today is the appearance day of Vishnupriya, the deity is also dressed as her because she's also present in this form. It's very very interesting. So the bottom image shows the bottom right shows Vishnupriya worshipping the Lord, because this is what she did for the rest of her life. She just chanted the holy names very strictly. For every holy name she would chant, she would put aside 1 grain of rice, and she would only eat that rice that she had put aside through her chanting. And no one would see her actually, or even hear her voice. She just stayed serving her mother-in-law, Srimati Sachi Devi, until her passing. And at least in one of the temples, there is a deity of Lord Chaitanya and Vishnupriya together. I actually forget which temple this was. I know we had darshan there, but you can see that image on the bottom left. Okay. So going back to our verse, the Mahapurush Lord Chaitanya, he gave up the association of the goddess of fortune, right? And all her opulence, which is most difficult to renounce and is hankered after by even the great demigods. Being the most faithful follower of the path of religion, right? Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a Brahmana and most faithful, particularly because he was teaching the highest religion, the chanting of the holy name. He left for the forest, right? He left for the ashram of sannyas in obedience to a Brahmana's curse. Out of sheer mercifulness, he chased after the fallen conditioned souls, and at the same time, he searched out his own desired object, which is, of course, Lord Shamasundar. Now, if we look at this verse, how can it refer to Krishna? Okay, so we can look at the Sanskrit now on the word for word. So it says, abandoning that which is difficult to give up, right? Tyaktva sudustyaja, and is anxiously desired by the demigods. Sura is demigod, Ipshita is desired. And what is desired by the demigods? The opulence, right? So Krishna also left behind the opulence of Mathura. That our acharyas explained that when he was born to Vasudeva and Devaki, and he couldn't remain in Mathura because of Kamsa's persecution, he left all the fortune, the opulence, and being the most perfect follower of religion, Dharmishta, he went to the forest according to the words of his parents. So let's look at the Sanskrit word there in the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth line, Arya Vachasa. Arya is the one who knows religion, and Vachasa is the words of. So his parents in that case are the knowers of religion, Vasudeva and Devaki. So by their words, he went to Vrindavan because they wanted him to be safe. And so the forest, now we look at the seventh line, Aranyam. The forest is Vrindavan. And then our acharyas explain that Maya Mrigam is actually Yoga Maya, Srimati Radharani. And Mrigam is Krishna as a toy, right, in her hands. So this is a way that Sanskrit can actually be understood by the interpretation of the words. And so he was actually running after her, who was his desired object, and Srimati Radharani. So this is how this verse can refer to Lord Krishna. And now if we look at it in terms of Lord Ram, he also abandoned, right, the opulence of his palace, right, as the most perfect follower of religion, and his Arya Vajasa were the words of his father, right? Arya in his case is his father, who is also like the Brahmana, somebody who knows religion. And then of course he went to the forest, Yad Agat Aranyam. And this time we can understand Maya. Maya refers to the illusory deer. Mrigam is toy or animal. And this was a desired object, right, by Srimati Sita Devi. And out of his mercy to her, he chased after. He ran after this deer. So this is how these verses can actually refer to all these lords. Vande Mahapurusha Te Charanaravinda. So Srila Prabhupada says in the purport of this verse, everyone should follow the example of the sage Karabhajana. So this verse is spoken by the sage Karabhajana in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and worship the lotus feet of the Mahaprabhu, the Mahapurush, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. One should not rot on the platform of mental speculation and whimsical interpretation, but should actually revive his lost relationship with the absolute truth by surrendering to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Those who are worshipping Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are deriving wonderful spiritual results and are tasting the fruit of love of Krishna. Therefore, Vande Mahapurusha Te Charanaravinda. Let us humbly bow down at the lotus feet of the original personality of Godhead, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the Mahapurusha glorified within Srimad Bhagavatam. Corroborating the explanation of this verse, the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also worship him in his six-armed form of Sadbuj. Two arms carry the water pot and danda of the sannyasi Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Two arms carry the flute of Lord Krishna, and two arms carry the bow and arrow of Sri Ramachandra. This Sadbuj form is the actual purport of this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. So something also interesting that I thought we could just conclude with other verses of the same chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam. It's Canto 11, Chapter 5, that come before and after this verse that we read now about the Sadbuj form of the Lord. Let's read Canto 11, Chapter 5, text 32. Krishna Varnam Trisha Krishnam Sango Bangashapashram Yagyai Sankirtane Praye Jantihi Sumedasaha. In the age of Kali, intelligent persons perform congregational chanting to worship the incarnation of Godhead, who constantly sings the names of Krishna. Although his complexion is not blackish, he is Krishna himself. He is accompanied by his associates, servants, weapons, and confidential companions. And then after the verse on Sadbuj, this is Canto 11, Chapter 5, text 36. Kaling Sambha Jayanti Arya Guna Gya Sarabhaginaha Yatra Sankirtane Neva Sarva Swarto Bhilabhyate. Translation is, those who are actually advanced in knowledge are able to appreciate the essential value of this age of Kali. Such enlightened persons worship Kali Yuga because in this fallen age, all perfection of life can be easily achieved, can easily be achieved by the performance of Sankirtan. And then another famous verse from Canto 12, Chapter 3, text 51. Kale dosha nidhe rajan asti hi eko mahan gunaha kirtanareva krishnasya mukta sangha param bhajet. My dear king, although Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults, there is still one good quality about this age. Simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, one can become free from material bondage and be promoted to the transcendental kingdom. So these references are very important because Srimad Bhagavatam is a very was one of the key Vaishnava scriptures. So across the Vaishnava realm, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is accepted as an incarnation of Krishna, or Krishna himself actually descended to preach the holy names. And the same as Lord Ramachandra. And this is also very important for us in this age of Kali Yuga, because without approaching Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we can't get the mercy of Krishna, we can't get the mercy of Lord Ram. And yet, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's glories are not so well known. Right? So this falls upon us to make sure of that, so that the conditioned souls who the Lord is chasing after can get his mercy. And then one other very nice verse that comes from the Mahabharata that describes Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is from a very interesting episode of the Mahabharata. Right? Bhishma Dev, right, at the end of his pastimes when he's about to disappear, he chants the Vishnu Sahasranam, 1,000 names of Lord Vishnu, and this is a very famous chant that is well known throughout Hinduism. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is mentioned in this, and not many people know that, right? But obviously, if we read the translation, right, it will make a lot of sense, right? So let's read the Sanskrit and then the translation. Suvarna Varna Hemango Varangas Chandanangadi Sanyasa Krishamaha Santo Nishta Shanti Parayanaha. And the translation is, the Lord has a golden complexion. Indeed, his entire body, which is very nicely constituted, is like molten gold. Sandalwood pulp is smeared all over his body. He will take the fourth order of life, sannyas, and will be very self-controlled. He will be distinguished from Mayavad sannyasis in that he will be fixed in devotional service and will spread the Sankirtan movement. And so how amazing is that? And something else that was noted on the ISKCON Society website, I really like this point, so I just want to end with that. It says there that Mahaprabhu Sannyas, right, in this verse, Sannyasakrit, it's proof of Krishna repaying his debt to the gopis. They had one point of love for him, so he has one point of love that he leaves behind everything. So there's three meanings they give to these words, Sannyasakrit. He who cuts asunder the bonds when desires are renounced, the institutor of the sannyas ashram for attainment of moksha, he who shows the path of Saranagati to his devotees. Om Sannyas Krite Namaha. Okay, so with that we will end. I'm sorry that we went on a bit, and I hope that the presentation helped a little bit with points that we made. It was probably a little bit philosophical. So thank you for your kind attention. Shri Prabhupada Ki. So we will continue our discussions next week on this chapter. Are there any comments or questions or anything that I can try and clarify?
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, dear Mataji, for a very, very beautiful class. I have no questions today.
Thank you, Mataji. If there are no other questions or comments, we'll just sing a very nice bhajan about springtime in Vrindavan, since we are celebrating that today. Okay, so in Africa it's the exact opposite, but in Vrindavan right now it is springtime. All the deities have been dressed in yellow today in order to commemorate that. It's the occasion of Vasant Panchami. So also on this day, there are many observances for Vaishnavas. It is the day that Vishnu Priya Devi appeared. It's the day also of the appearance of Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, and he's actually just an extraordinary follower of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Right? He's our Prayojanacharya. Right? He guides us to that most exalted step of love of Godhead. Right? And he was actually the emblem of renunciation. Right? He was living on just half a leaf cup of buttermilk every day while he was engaging in his devotional service. And this included so many things, from writing transcendental literature to excavating the holy places to worshipping the Lord to associating and serving devotees and the Brajavasis. And he was constantly engaged in the Lord's service. He slept very little as well. And we are so fortunate that he did this because we have so many of his writings available today, and to learn about the very, very, very deep pastimes of Radha and Krishna when we come to that level of spiritual maturity to be able to appreciate them. And what is also interesting is that he actually came from a very wealthy background, and he left everything behind, including a beautiful young wife, just like Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because of his extraordinary attachment to the Lord. So also it's the appearance day of Srila Pujik Vidyanidhi. He was also really a follower of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He became the spiritual master of Gadadhar Pandit, although externally he appeared very wealthy, almost like a materialist. Even Gadadhar Pandit thought that he was one when he first met him. He actually was absorbed in the ecstasies of love of Godhead. And because Gadadhar Pandit was felt a bit offensive when he thought of him as just a materialist, he ended up taking initiation from Punjik Vidyanidhi, who is known to be the incarnation of Srimati Radharani's father. Right? Gadadhar Pandit is actually Srimati Radharani in Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. Then it's also the appearance day of Raghunandan Thakur. He's the son of one of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's very dear associates. And he was so advanced that his father actually considered him a spiritual master, something Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu approved of, Raghunandan Thakur. And it is the disappearance day of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. He was also a very extraordinary acharya in our line. He gave us a lot of wonderful commentaries that we draw on for our understanding of scripture. And of course, he wrote the very famous Guru Ashtakam prayer that we sing every morning at Mangal Aarti. It's his disappearance day today. This day is also Saraswati Puja. Many people worship Saraswati Devi because it's the day that she appeared from the mind of Brahma. So it's the day that children offer their school books to her to get her blessings. And we know that Srimati Radharani is the origin of all goddesses. Right? So we offer our prayers directly to her lotus feet, that she will help us to gain all knowledge, not just academic knowledge, but also spiritual knowledge, so we can attain the most desired object, Lord Shyamasundar. So with that, we will sing this bhajan, Vrindavana Ramyastam. This one is a bit difficult to, the tune that I know is, it's one line at a time, so it's not possible to do a call and response, but we can just appreciate the meaning of this beautiful bhajan. And it was written by Narottam Das Thakur. Vrindavanaram yastana divya chintamanidam ratana mandira manoham Abrita Kalindinire Raja Hamsa Kehli Kare Tahe Shabhe Kanaka Tara Madhye Hema Pita Astadale Bheshtita Ashtadale Pradhananaika Tara Madhye Ratnasane Bhasyachin Duijane Shama Sange Sundari Radhika Rupalabhanya Rashi Amiya परिचय खासी हास्या परिहास संभासने नारोत्तम दास कोया नित्या लीला सुखमया सराय पुरुष मोर And the translation is, beautiful Vrindavan is filled with Chintamani gems and many jewel palaces and temples. Many regal swans play in the waters of the Yamuna, and in those waters a splendid golden lotus flower grows. In the middle of that lotus is a golden palace surrounded by 8 petals. On these 8 petals the 8 principal gopis reside, and in the center Lord Shamsundar and beautiful Srimati Radharani sit on a jewel throne. The great beauty of the divine couple and their charming joking and laughter continually showers nectar everywhere. Narottam Das says, I pray that these blissful, eternal, transcendental pastimes of the divine couple may be always manifested in my heart. Shri Shri Radha Radhana Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundari Ki Jai, Shri Shri Nitai Gaura Hari Ki Jai, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram Ki Jai, Shri Vishnu Priya Devi Ki Jai, Shri Raghunandan Thakur Ki Jai, Shri Raghunath Das Swami Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Thakur Ki Jai, Shri Kunjik Vijayanidhi Thakur Ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai, Shri Shri Thakur Hari Hari Ho, Shri Narottam Das Thakur Ki Jai. So thank you all for your kind attention, and we will continue with the third part of chapter 26 next week. Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna everyone.
Thank you, Mataji.